Hi, I'm Kurt Doolittle from Propertarian Institute. Today we're going to work through the method a little bit more. This section is the preface, which is what is it we're presenting and who's it for. I usually start with, this might start out a little poetically, but the idea is to understand the foundations of this system is via negativa. And we'll explain that a little later on. The sculptor works via positiva to add clay, and then sculptor works via negativa to remove stone. And if you were to go in court, you'd argue against each other, or be in a duel, you'd argue against each other, or be in the market, you'd compete against each other, or be at war, you'd fight against each other. But that's via adversarialism. In other words, the only proof is survival of the fittest in the market for finding out what true is. So we tend to, in philosophy, this is called justification, making excuses, via positiva, giving your reasons, and via negativa, which is falsification, which is removing error, bias, and deceit, ignorance, error, bias, and deceit. So via adversarialism, competition, in a competition between via positiva and via negativa, all that survives are truth candidates. Survival of the fittest is determined by survival from adversarial competition. This is really a statement of, this isn't a moral statement or anything else. It's just how epistemology works. If we look at the history of all thought and discovery, it tends to be 3 generations of competitors working their way up till you produce a few thought leaders who obtain all the credit for the miraculous discovery, but it was the many fallen in the war of science before them that produced the building blocks of the fortress of their success. So whether in commerce, duel, court, or war, the truth is decided by no other means than adversarial competition, the survival of the fittest. It means you don't make this judgment by yourself. Others don't make it, but we make it by the evidence of correspondence with nature. So in our world, what we're trying to work with is we're trying to solve a social science problem, or a moral, ethical, social science, psychological problem. And so the equivalent in ethics would be the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them done unto you. And in this case, what we're saying is we're making a promise of non-aggression. That's the ethics of the priesthood. It's the ethics of mothers. It's also the ethics of poverty. Conversely, the silver rule, I always think these should be inverted so that the golden is the silver and the silver is the golden. Don't do unto others that they don't want done unto them. And unfortunately, that requires you have knowledge of the values of others. In the golden rule, you're projecting your values upon others. In the silver rule, you're understanding their values and not imposing costs upon them. So this is don't aggress in the first place, and this is the ethics of politicians, fathers, and prosperity. And then the iron rule, what is that? I won't quote that poem right now, but the via negativa iron rule, and you notice there's 1 positiva and two negativas, is never tolerate that what you and yours would want done, not want done unto them, nor the doing unto others as they don't want done unto them. In other words, punish all aggressors. So make a promise of non-aggression, make a don't aggress in the first place, and then punish all aggressions. This is we'll find this painful series visible in the theory of rights, which has to have 3 parts: rights, obligations, and insurance or warranty of those. So we call those inalienations. So while we want to simplify it to a single rule, the simple for the children is don't do anything you wouldn't do on you wouldn't want done to you. Well, that's possible because it's all the child can know. On the other hand, in maturity and wisdom, we say, don't do anything to others that they wouldn't want done unto them, but you need to know what those things are. That takes a little more maturity. And then you need to be influential and have some strength in order to implement the iron rule, which is make damn sure nobody breaks either of those rules, because that's the source of all conflict. So in that vein, you're going to find a lot of other thinkers who work via positiva. And that's really what people want, though, is you want to be told what to do or what the right answer is. And they'll work with deceit or ideology or sophistry or philosophy or magic or pseudoscience or occultism or theology, whatever. They'll try to persuade us what to think or even say and do under the promise of some opportunity. That these theories will produce some good. So that's wonderful, but that's a theory of what is the good. The law, on the other hand, science and logic do the opposite. Via negativa, they persuade us what's false, what not to say, think, or do, based on the evidence of the bad or what fails under some threat of deprivation or loss, or at least wasted effort. This law maximizes the incentive to explore, innovate, apply, and adapt to all opportunities that aren't bad, rather than demanding that we're good. In other words, the tendency of telling people what to do produces stagnation, and the tendency of telling people only what not to do tends to promote the greatest experimentation. As such, humans are somewhat different from the machines we work with every day, and that we program machines positively. We write an instruction or algorithms for computers or software because they can't basically choose on their own. They can't, and even if they don't have the basis for making any real world meaning out of what we're telling them. They're processing as what Searle called Chinese characters. But what people, on the other hand, do have things they are motivated to do, inspired to do, and can do. And so fundamentally, we program populations, families with behaviors, and societies with norms, and polities with institutions and laws, and civilizations with things like basic metaphysics and religion, etc. Although religion, in the West, we have a self-interested view of religion that's overstated. That scale of positive and preventative laws is what makes us successful. Successful, that's an incomplete statement. Successful at causing billions of super predators to work with each other to produce prosperity for each other, despite the fact that we're scary super predators. So the concept of via negativa versus positiva versus adversarialism is, so you're going to find this, that other people try to seek to program the good. They want to tell you an ideology or philosophy or something of that nature, and to reduce our cognitive burden and to inspire us to work together toward a desirable end, and to reduce the cost of adaptation or experimentation in discovery in pursuit of that end. But we do that often at the cost, that presumption of innovation, adaptation, and prosperity. So a small group of people need to have a common interest, but as the population grows, you want as much experimentation and innovation as possible. Otherwise, you do what most societies do, which is they decline. But in doing so, while this is producing a direction for even massive amounts of people, it's desirable under many circumstances. But the problem is how do you get people to do that? What's the treat you hold out in front of them to get them, to inspire them to change their behavior to pursue something in a common good versus maintain their behavior pursuing the current goods? Well, their incentive is to create a large number of allies, and they can often this is goes both directions. You can inspire people to adapt and innovate and change and invest, or you can inspire people to resist adaptation and not bear the cost of adaptation to whatever innovation would make you more prosperous. And in creating numbers of allies, their incentive is often to offer false promises that in exchange for alliance with them, in other words, the group benefit will be obtained by working together. Often they use baiting. They bait people into subsequent hazards. In other words, the promise they give them causes a worse consequence than the costs they evaded or the benefits they tried to obtain. It's a wonderful book on this. Set of books on this. Iron Law of Oligarchy is one of the best. But democratic polities have this problem, is that there is nothing that is good for all, that is best for all. There is just organizing people, some number of which have some coincidence of wants that are more likely to be obtained by cooperating with each other than they are by doing whatever they're doing now. So the promise of the good needs to be free of the prohibited bad. And that's the function of law. It's the via negativa organization of man, is how do we direct people to cooperate by whatever inspirational or incentive means possible without producing the externalities that produce the bad. It turns out an awful lot of the time people are hawking cheap goods to a gullible populace that bait them into harm, so that the people hawking the cheap goods that will cause harm simply get to evade the hard work of doing something productive instead, or in order to obtain power so they and their allies can obtain something by non-market means. Non-meritocratic means is what I meant. So as I said, law is a via negativa, and P-law, which is what we're doing, is a universal science of decidability. That's the methodology part, producing an operational logic and paradigm of decidability. That's the logic across all human cognition, including language, logics, science, and particularly behavioral sciences, including language, psychology, sociology, ethics, law, politics, and group evolutionary strategy. And I think I forgot economics in there. And then we apply that law to restate not only those sciences, but all disciplines in that universal logic and paradigm of decidability. In other words, we're creating a system of measurement so that people can speak truthfully, and more importantly, perhaps, we can discover when people are speaking untruthfully. So realistically, that looks a lot like writing about economics and law in programming code. It looks a lot like that because fundamentally that's the most recent innovation in our ability to calculate. So, if you're looking for something simple, in other words, if you want an ideology or a secular theology or a supernatural theology, I'm following the footsteps of, my Anglo forefathers, specifically the founders of the United States, who were some of the 70 of the smartest guys that had worked hardest at understanding these problems in history. And I'm producing a body of law, and the output of that body of law is a reformation of our understanding, a reformation of understanding about our history, what caused the West to succeed faster than the rest, not first, but fastest, and much faster than all others combined. What is it that produced this prosperity, and how to put that into law, constitution, institutions, policy, economy, etc., so that we all we all leave behind this predation on the middle and laboring classes. Now, as a one percenter, frankly, I could go off and I probably will go off and build another fairly large business and make another fortune. The problem is that screws over the little guy, and that's not my job. I mean, my moral ambition is to take care of the little guy and leave that legacy rather than consumption. So we're going to combine to try to do that. Sorry, but this is science. It's not secular theology, and everybody wants that for me. And if you want me to someday produce, I know what a true religion looks like, and it's a lot closer to what some of our religions are today. They just need to be reframed a little bit. If the Catholic Church had a guy like me back in the middle 1800s, maybe it would have reformed correctly. This isn't possible, but that is, however, a different thing. That's a via positiva wisdom literature, and my job is science of decidability, so that we can take people to court to prevent politicians and academics and people in marketing and finance and the academy from industrializing lying, because that's really what's happened in the 20th century. Is media made possible the industrialization of lying, and our law always lags for various reasons, and we don't tend to act until it's too late, or we must, and so it's time we must. So we're going to combine the foundations of math and physics and behavioral economics and evolutionary biology and cognitive science and linguistics, which is a whole lot of fields, which is why this stuff seems complicated to most people, but we're going to combine a lot of fields. In other words, most people don't have the time to learn all those fields. Well, if you learn what we're doing, you don't have to learn all those fields, because the algorithm the methodology that makes them all commensurable and makes them all understandable is the same, and that's the method. So the method consists of a science for the production of testimony that we can test by physical, logical, sensory instrumentation. In other words, you can use a mechanical, physical thing as a measurement instrument. You can use your body, you can use your senses, and you can use your mind as instruments by which to test that something's unambiguous, consistent, causal, correspondent, and coherent with the sciences across all sciences. So we're going to define the method. It consists of the process of identification of first causes and the resulting rules of first causes. That's sort of like the before step. The second step is to produce a logic that's a formal, operational, deflationary, adversarial logic, which means, like I said in the beginning, it's not making excuses for why you do something or why it's good. We're saying that if you can't do it this way, then if you can't do it this way, or if you do it that way, then it's false and unethical, criminal, unethical, immoral, and war. And so that's what we're trying to produce, is that logic. That's fairly easy. And then we're going to apply that logic to, as an applied science, to the ethics, politics, group strategy, and everything else. So sort of before, during, and after phases. That's why this while the method is actually fairly simple, using the method to produce first causes, and then using the method to reconstruct the logic of each of the vocabulary and paradigm and reasoning of the rest of the disciplines, well, it's a big job. So unfortunately, we have to touch, or I had to touch everything. Thankfully, you won't have to. So who's the audience? Well, I treat the market as a reason. In other words, social media is beautiful because, of course, I can sit here at the Institute. I don't have to find a university job. I can do things that won't get me fired from a university job. I can say things, think things, and work on programs that won't be fired from a university job. And I can produce cross-disciplinary thought, which you'll see here, which is basically prohibited by the university system, which has gone into specialization, over-specialization, and become a little bit ridiculous in many fields. So there are a lot of reasons to be interested, and for the curious, if you just want to learn something new, maybe you'll just want to learn that such a thing exists, that we don't have to resort to philosophizing anymore. We can actually conduct a sort of science, a scientific discourse around almost every aspect of life. And then maybe you're an activist and you want to seek political change. Now, because I come from a certain conservative libertarian background, and because I'm following the founders and I come up with as a conservative, this gives the impression that I want some sort of something different from what the founders set out to do, instead of continuing the 5,000 year old European process of gradually producing the most rapidly evolving, most prosperous society that is humanly possible. And so maybe you want to participate in that, because frankly, my policies are as beneficial to the people on the left, especially the working and certainly on the laboring classes, who they make suffer as the political, financial, and academic classes who've industrialized lying over the 19th and 20th century. Now, if you're a revolutionary, and I guess I am, at least everybody seems to think so, or I wouldn't have the FBI on my door saying, "Can you please not start a civil war?" Anyway, if you want a shovel-ready solution to political orders, and if you want to understand how, you can make any political system under P law as long as you do it truthfully. I mean, you're going to pay the price for whatever and reap the rewards of whatever civilization you want. You might pay that price over generations, or you could pay it right now. The choice, but however, there's no magic to human behavior and economics, innovation, and prosperity. It's a fairly simple thing, just like the rest of evolution is a fairly simple thing. And over time, you can't defeat Mother Nature, and everyone who tries, every family, clan, tribe, nation, polity, nation, state, empire that tries to defeat Mother Nature pays a very heady price for it. So if you want a shovel-ready solution, or if you're on either side, the Institute's view, or Brandon's view as our sort of political strategist, is that we're providing the right solution for all sides, except the people who want status by deceit because they're envious. If you're a politician, you're looking for solutions to transform the post-communist capitalist world, although we have to understand that those words were both invented as part of the lie. There's no such thing as it's impossible to have anything other than a mixed economy. The question is that how do you mix it up? And I think we solved that problem here. So if you're looking for an answer, we have it. Again, though, you have the price of solving the problem of modernity is paying the cost of falsifying the big lies and the false promises of some of the Enlightenment, and certainly the 19th and 20th century bloom in pseudoscience and sophistry. If you're a jurist, which is my favorite part of the work, if you're a jurist and you've found some comfort in Scalia's restoration of some kind of empiricism to the law, and somewhat turned the clock back on the French and the attempt to produce French and Jewish authoritarian construction of law, and thereby ending rule of law forever, you're going to find this interesting, because it is, while strict construction in law, in other words, in juridical theory, theories of jurisprudence, the strict construction means something different from what it means to the vernacular. In the theories of jurisprudence, strict construction is a way of interpreting law, and that's not right. We want an empirical law, needs to be interpreted empirically, but it is possible to create strictly constructed, in other words, a formal logic of law, and to produce an algorithmic body of law that is fully decidable in all circumstances, and moreover, I spend quite a bit of time explaining the history of Western civilization, how the constancy of our development of our law over time, and the underlying theory of it, in other words, the underlying social organization of it, political organization, that we have left unstated or unresearched. And I've brought that into the forefront as something completely understandable. So we can produce a formal logic of law, and when you do that, you'll have a far greater appreciation for the common law than you've ever had, and you'll be like me, is about as anti-continental law as possible. If you're philosophers, of course, there's no word anymore. Once you've demarcated philosophy and science completely, which I think our method does, what's happened is that philosophy becomes choice and decidability becomes truth, and all of a sudden you're stuck with this thing as what do you call yourself when you work on this? Now, there's the philosophical method of reason, rationalism, etc., and the scientific method, which tends to be more empirical and law has the broadest scope of every domain. And there's nothing the law doesn't have to decide that's a matter of conflict. Everything else is choice, preference, or exploration. So if you'd like to convert from speaking in philosophical terms, which I can't doubt, because really philosophy is very close to a secular theology. If you speak in scientific terms, then you'll be able to make this transition and hopefully prevent obsolescence. We do know what's happening in philosophy. It's been treated as a branch of theology. It's been defunded. If you read papers in philosophy, it's not so much of a replication crisis, an untestability crisis. So the crisis that's in the sociology, psychology, and I can't believe we call political science anything like science. It's political philosophy. If you look at these, or even economics, if you look at the holes in these things, then we'll give you the answer to the holes in those problems, because the replication crisis in philosophy doesn't exist. I mean, we know what's wrong with philosophy, and we will cover that here, although you cover more of it in the course side than in this presentation side. I've tried to keep the presentation at the level that a college-educated person can understand. Once we get into arguing logic or arguing these very high-level concepts, we begin to lose the audience, and worse, P-law is prosecutorial, whereas philosophy tends to be deliberative. And so while in philosophy you might find something untrue or not reasonable or not good, we also include, you're trying to lie, cheat, and steal. And so the discourse between philosophy, theology, and law or science and law being the same thing, is difficult because we have different standards of recrimination of one another's use of their favorite method of argument. So a philosopher will chastise a theologian, and a scientist will chastise a philosopher, and that's because the degree of precision possible in these methods is far higher. Now, the one you won't get, because you got to realize I started out in this is where I started out, was artificial intelligence researchers and developers who want to solve the problem of rational, ethical, and moral general AI. Well, you're gonna find the answer here. We probably have, most of the community's probably figured out that the current Bayesian logic we're using is somewhat limited by the means of commensurability with the world, or embodiment, as most philosophers put it. And so without that means of embodiment, we probably can't solve it. But without understanding the physics of ethics, so to speak, you're going to understand the same problem. So we should have a solution here for you to add to your research. If you're a software developer, likewise working in AI or various monetary substitutes, who are seeking a language that more readily explains your ambitions, this is the unified language of human behavior. So, who's the audience? The audience is those things. I tried to address as many markets as I could. I hope you'll find that interesting. This is the end of the preface for discussing the method. The next section is in the introduction. In the introduction, I'll cover a few useful pieces, and hopefully you'll stick with us. And if not, I hope that eventually the market finds that it's been useful enough that you'll get it indirectly. Anyway, I'm Kurt Doolittle for the Proprietarian Institute. Thank you for listening.